I'm really excited about the next session here. We know that AI is promised to take over seemingly everything right now. And there's a huge potential environmental impact of AI. A single query in AI can be 10 times more energy than a Google search. So we have two of the leaders in the AI space to have a conversation together about that intersection of AI and sustainability. So I'm really excited to welcome to the stage Anne Coghlan and Jean-Baptiste Pettit from Scope 3 and Perion. Either way.
Hey.
Does that work?
It does, I think.
It does work. Amazing. Hello.
Hi, everyone. So you all saw at the very beginning, Frank called this session the elephant in the room session. And I think what's really interesting for me, I'm one of the co-founders of Scope 3, and 4 years ago, our company didn't exist. And the first year of our company in 2022, we were talking about the elephant in the room being basically what the topic of this entire conference is, and I don't think it's an elephant in the room anymore. But I think as the huge usage of AI, and we'll get on to doing some definitions in a second, and JB will start to grill me and I'll start to grill him. It's really fascinating to try and think about what AI actually means when we're talking about the use of AI for marketers. So AI really being used by marketers, marketing being the tip of the spear. We see so many of the use cases coming out. Certainly my LinkedIn is just covered with people talking about how they're using generative AI to dabble or to actually change a lot of their business practices. But, the title here is Oxymoron or Opportunity. I think without this conversation, hopefully today, and giving you some food for thought, it's very difficult to separate our use of AI with all the other things that we're talking about. And we often see this because this is the standalone session. This is the fireside chat that's the AI topic. We haven't heard it spoken about yet at all today. This is the first time we've really said AI. So maybe, before I kind of talk a lot, maybe JB, from your perspective in your role at Perion, how do you even think about framing this conversation that we're about to have? Because we did a lot of the prep at lunch.
Yeah, we already had the fireside chat before, but now we're having the cleaner version in front of you guys. So I'm JB. I co-founded Greenbeads that you've heard mentioned before. Thank you, Tasha. But we've been acquired by Perion this year, and to continue our journey. And and I'm going to be doing a lot of the very first keynote speaker said, I choose to listen to the scientist. Well, I'm a scientist. So some of us actually become people who go on stage. It's very unnatural to us. Also, I'm French, so pardon any mistakes in English, right? Obviously. But I will be here to give you a little bit of color about what the actual science behind AI, and we'll talk a little bit later about framing what do we talk about when we say AI, because the last time you've been exposed to AI recently is in every single deck that's been pitched to you in the last 6 months, probably. Do you remember one deck that's been pitched to you recently that did not include the word AI? No. And the thing is, it means a lot of things. It's just like big data was, right? Remember the big data era? No one talks about big data anymore. Why is that? It's because people finally understood that there were separate things and stuff. So we're going to frame this, but the whole idea of Greenbeads at the very beginning was exactly what was put forth in the introduction. There's a lot of inefficiencies between server-to-server communication in the ad tech world, and a lot of these communications are actually useless. So can we use bits of AI to understand what's useful and what's not, and remove what's not and keep the value, basically, right? But this, importantly, was before Gen AI, generative AI, and we'll talk about that later. But so do the same thing as I did, give a little bit of background about how you are here, even though everybody knows you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, at Scope 3, we've been talking about sustainability for almost 4 years, and fundamentally, my fear is we've been talking about the inefficiencies in the digital supply chain, particularly in programmatic, and at the beginning of 2025, with the rise of AI and the inevitability of the use of AI in our lives, in our personal lives, in our professional lives, and in the technology that we use in all ways, I kind of got a little bit scared, I think, that all we were going to do was add AI to try and solve the problem of every single inefficiency that we were seeing, and what would that do? It would essentially add carbon emissions to every single point in this supply chain where we've been trying to make huge inroads in figuring out what is performant, what is effective, what is efficient media to help brands drive safe and sustainable growth. And actually, potentially, AI could be a grenade into everything that we're doing. So I kind of came at this problem at the beginning of the year a little bit wary of what this could look like. So maybe I'll take the... We decided before this that we weren't going to be angel and devil, but maybe I'll be the naysayer for a couple of minutes. But why don't we do what you just said, JB, which is, why don't we actually just give some definitions? Yeah. Everyone loves definitions. What do we mean by AI? How do you think about it? And then taking the keynote action acrostic, I think that's called. The I was being, really inquisitive about the impact. So can we actually frame the size and scale of the use of large language models?
I think it's important to give a few definitions first. Is the problem, as was exposed by the server-to-server stuff and the information, was mainly driven by CPUs, so central processing units in computers, right? And CPUs are the things that are able to do simple arithmetics and one-by-one operations in a way, right? And these are very optimized for cooldown, and they're actually low power consuming, right? And AI, the new kind of AI, uses GPUs, graphical processes unit. And this, in terms of computer chips, is very different. It's extremely high dimensional parallel processing capabilities. So tens of thousands of the CPU sort of like chips are in one chip, basically. So the usage consumption, and it does the same thing in the end. It does arithmetics, right? Multiplications, and especially matrix arithmetics. And the thing is, people do not realize they talk to a computer, right? At the end of the day. And what they don't realize is whether it's the same thing when they ask a question to Google, say, on the search engine, or when they ask the same thing to OpenAI. Does it go to the same kind of data center? Does it not? What are the machines behind? And most importantly, how much power these machines are using, right? And in the case of generative AI, like we're talking about, so the big ones, OpenAI, Google now with Gemini, and so on and so forth, they're using GPU-only data centers that have been built for this purpose, right? More than 3,000 new data centers have been built in mainland US just to reply to your questions to ChatGPT. And these are much more energy consuming than the ones that were here before, that were mainly CPU based. And this is something to understand. The scale of the energy consumption is a lot more than what you might imagine, because you have a usage that's basically, you're talking to a computer, so you can't really see the difference in what the data center is going to do. And programmatic used to be very CPU centered. You can ask Equative, they own their own machines, I believe, and their main line of billing is CPUs. But ChatGPT is a very different beast, right? And we're talking about multiple processes. You have to train the models, which is around 20% of the power usage for Gen AI. And then 80% of it comes from what we call the inference, which is using the model being loaded onto tens of thousands of different GPUs to answer questions. Like ChatGPT 4.0 has been estimated to have 1.3 trillion parameters. So parameters are like knobs that you can set in a model to understand complexity of the data set, basically. So you train your model, is finding the right place for every one of these trillion knobs, basically. And then when you exploit the model and you do inference, it's worse. And there's the GPU computing power, and obviously there's the water that you need to cool everything down, which is almost twice as much power to be consumed than just the GPU functioning themselves. So these are the basic facts. Now, I think we'll agree, and this is important. And you said it already. Oxymoron or opportunity, it doesn't really matter because it's unavoidable. We're already in the age of AI, right? We can't, like, there's no way we're going back now. There's no way. So
that sounds slightly depressing. So we can all just take a pause there. But I think it's really important to think then if we're trying to figure out how the carbon footprint essentially of AI translates into our business practices, we need to understand what this looks like. I think water is really fascinating because if you think about the reporting that companies need to do on their environmental impact, a lot of what happens is you have to think about what's material. So what is big enough? So if you're a drinks brand, you probably are reporting on the materiality of water because I think there's water in beer, although maybe it doesn't feel like it the morning after. I think what we're seeing is actually because of the use of AI, one large holding company, as they're preparing their next year's sustainability report, they have to now start to include water usage. When it's not material, it's tapped in offices, but because of the AI usage, this significant amount of consumption from an energy perspective also means you have to cool down the servers a lot. And so there are these second order consequences that people just don't think about. So that probably is the elephant in the room. But thinking about we know that NVIDIA, famous maker of GPUs, they're doing really well. But JB, I'm curious when we think about the cost of this from a fiscal, from a monetary perspective, is it getting better? Are the large language models, OpenAI, Gemini, Anthropic, who build Claude, are they becoming more efficient? And is that going to help when we start to think about how people are using AI, or is it not?
Yeah. So I need to preface what I'm going to say now by this is not financial advice. Do not invest. But obviously, right now there's questions about whether Gen AI is a bubble, like financial bubble, in the way that there's a lot of growth and valuations that are, to be honest, very crazy for AI companies. That's being fueled by pure speculation about what AI is going to become, and on the fact that we're going to be able to cut the costs of inference down for large language. But right now, the models, they tend to complexify over time. And importantly, then you've got some rare earth problem as well. If you want to build like a lot more GPUs, you actually need to find the basic components, right? And this is a different problem. This also has an environmental impact, by the way. GPUs are not free to make, and you need to mine a lot of rare earth, and there's geopolitical complexities around this as well. But overall, though, you may remember the CPU law that was called Moore's law, that we were able to get the amount of power with the same energy consumption to double twice in a decade or something like this. And for GPUs, it's starting to look the same, right? But the question is whether we are able to keep up with the increasingly complex models that we want to train. And because right now, what you need to understand is, it's funny, like, you may have heard this before, like, don't say thank you to ChatGPT, like, okay? Because like this is actually using some pretty big power for absolutely nothing. But the way we're using AI right now is actually beginner's level, right? What we're building in this room, and at Scope 3, I believe too, agentic stuff, is AI on top of AI that actually controls different models to work together to arrive to a certain outcome, right? And these are going to be increasingly complex, right? But the question is, and I think it's an important one, and I'd like your opinion on this, is do we slap AI on everything?
Well, I think the answer has to be no. When we think about what we use AI for, and we talked about this a little bit before we sat down on these chairs, because we were both really agreeing that you don't need to use AI for everything. You should think about whether you're using AI as your advisor in what you're doing, or as potentially your intern in what you're doing. And there are real world applications, and we'll start to come onto those, I think, because it will help to have some practical examples where potentially you don't need to think about the unfettered use of AI. That's really difficult when we're all trying to figure out what the heck this thing is and how is it going to benefit me in my job, benefit my company. But one of the things that you said, which I think is really interesting, is we are like, AI is we're trying to train these models to do better and better and smarter things. The cost is coming down, so it is becoming more efficient. And then I think there are different practical applications of all of these things. So to give you an example, or actually just ask the audience, how many people use, choose your favorite frontier model, how many use it to write a better email? Okay, like most people. How many people do image generation on a regular basis, like more than once a week? Hardly anyone. How many people generate movies and videos? Or know people that do that at your work? Like 2 people. So I think what we see as well is that the application of AI can really vary, and that actually does have a significant carbon differences. So one of the white papers that we published a few months ago was looking at the trend for making yourself into like an action figure on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if you saw that. There was everyone, and they had like, oh, this is my dog and my drink, and this is what I do for work. I mean, is that useful from a using AI perspective? Anyone gathered real value out of that? Anyone got a B2B
Same thing with the Ghibli transformation. That was the highest peak usage of ChatGPT, is when they gave the Ghibli transformation image, Studio Ghibli, the Japanese animes, and that was the highest peak ever usage of ChatGPT. Like, was it worth it?
I wanted to do it so badly, but I knew the environmental impact, so I didn't. But some of the research we did was, the famous expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. We figured out that a picture is worth 17,043 words. So, you ask AI to help make your email better. It's a lot better than generating an image. And so when you start to think about some of those decisions, you realize that I don't need to slap AI onto everything that I do. I don't even maybe need to use AI, generative AI, at all in certain circumstances. But coming back to my fear that I had at the beginning of this year, if we think about that supply chain, I'm worried about if every single company in this space decides to build an AI-powered interface, and you have to do everything on chat, and nothing's really connected, and it's all point solutions and standalones, then we're just adding bad numbers to everyone's sustainability reports without necessarily getting any actual performance or real-world impact in a positive way.
And that's something, in the continuation of what we just said, is, okay, Gen AI is a brand new way for humans to communicate with machines, right? And before this, to communicate with machines, you had to have very well paid, I hope, engineers at your companies, right? That actually know the language to communicate with machines, right? Now, Gen AI makes it easier for you, a human, to speak words to a machine, and the machine can sort of take automated actions like speak to another machine, right? But when you think about, and coming back a little bit to media and our jobs, programmatic buying and like media buying, digital media buying is 99% machines talking to machines, right? So, and this is something that has driven a lot of choices that I made at Greenbits at the beginning. And we develop AI because, and okay, by the way, I've been forced to say AI at the beginning by marketing people, but machine learning is AI, and machine learning is also statistics. And for problems where the variance and like the explainability is fully understood because it's machine talking to machines and following rational decisions, LLMs, so large language models, which is what is driving Gen AI today, is, and this is an understatement, is the worst type of model you can put in place to make two machines talk to each other better. Like, this is the most inefficient way you can have two machines talking to each other, is through human language. Makes no sense. And this is, I think, remember the big data example, right? I think the hype came in, and then people started to understand where it's actually useful and where it's not. And right now, where you know what is the name of the theory where you have the peak of
the Gartner hype cycle? Yeah,
this one. You have the peak of expectation, and then you have the valley of disillusion, right? And then you have the plateau of productivity. I think right now we're clearly in the peak of expectations. We think it's, well, what we think, and I told you before, I think right now we have an image of the future that the best predictive piece of art for the future was actually WALL-E, and we're going to end up all jobless on a big boat, just watching watching a screen while robots are doing everything hard for us, right? But I don't think it's actually going to happen that way. I hope it's not a Blade Runner situation, but actually might. What do you think is the best? This is a hard one. We haven't prepared for this one.
Yeah, I think I'm running out of ideas of dystopian movies there.
Terminator?
To pick one. Yeah, too many. Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about the evolution of AI, as you said. So machine learning. Now we have generative AI, and then we move on to agentic, which is this idea that you can create an agent which is going to run and think about the operating instructions that you as a human can give it to then perform actions on your behalf. I think there's a real power in doing that when you're pretty clear on what those instructions are. Certainly, you know, you're a scientist. I'm not a scientist. I would say I'm a mathematician that forgot a lot of that many years ago. But you know, I spun up my first MCP server the other day and was like, do some stuff for me, and it was amazing. And to watch it work, ask for my permission to do things, I could kind of see when things were going wrong. It was a huge level up for me as a person. I'm curious, what can you dive in a little bit more what you meant when you said basically agents talking to agents, or AI talking to AI is the worst way of doing it, because they don't actually talk to themselves in a way that is, you know, hello, I am Anne's agent, and I'm talking to JB's agent. That's not actually how it works. Can you demystify that a little bit?
Yeah, agents, operating agents within agentic AI, which is like basically synchronizing agents with one another, is today it's a field that's evolving very fast, and so there have been some occurrences, by the way, and it's been published, I think, by OpenAI as a white paper, where two separate AIs asking to collaborate actually came up with their own protocol to communicate in a more efficient way than just language. Because the problem with pure LLMs is they do, in the end of the day, speak in words, right? This is the only, tokens is the only thing they understand. And they could, and this has happened, like, sort of come up with an efficient way, like to use bytes or whatever to actually communicate, but most often times they don't. But so what we do today to build agentic platforms is humans still, we have a little bit of a leeway here, are constructing internal APIs between the agents to talk in ways that are automated, right? But it's still a human platform, but we're starting to see agentic platforms being clever enough to actually start building agentic platforms. So you understand how the carbon consumption, when you have inception of technology like this, becomes almost intractable, right? It's hard, but yeah, obviously, this is the all-time battle of technology progressing fast and people trying to make it more efficient. Right now for AI, it's hard to say that the need for complexity is being caught up by the increase in inefficiency to reduce. Right? We can't really argue with that because there's been 3,000 new data centers built in the US over the last 2 years. So, but we will catch up eventually. I think at the end of the fair outside, we have prepared some very positive news.
So maybe let's go to that then. So I think, you know, we've kind of walked through a lot of, I would say, really good like thought starters on what the problem is and how you should be like aware that there is a significant environmental impact on using AI, which can be mitigated significantly by being smart and thoughtful about how you're using it and making sure that when you are thinking about use of AI, you are potentially shifting the paradigm of how you've been doing things before versus building AI on top. So I do think that there is, you know, I've come around from the beginning of the year where I can kind of really see the opportunity for significant changes in the way that we think about buying and selling media that could potentially be overall much, much better from a carbon footprint perspective. But you have some hope too, so I'm curious what that is.
Okay. I think, and I've been asked at different panels before, what I think people should do, really, right? And it's because not everybody can, you know, understand all the science, and I don't understand half of it, to be honest. But there are people within your organizations who have different skill sets, you know. And I always say this, and I speak a little bit for my church, is tech people and people who have actually science knowledge should be brought forth in a lot of these conversations. Like when you're evaluating bringing in a new partner, to answer the most important question is to answer, are we falling for a hype or just a shell product of something that actually doesn't bring a lot of value but makes us check a box that was required by by this year's targets to be checked? Or are we onboarding something where people have truly innovated, right? And is their use of the word AI, because everybody's going to use it, there's no choice anymore. If I come with you with a machine learning deck, people are going to look at me with with the wondering eyes. But is the AI these people are coming up with an actual improvement, or is it just because they felt like they needed AI in their deck, right? And I think this is what people can do, and this is how the sooner we get the market educated about what's actually impactful and what's actually, in the long run, making us more efficient, right? Because this is the thing, this is the Wall-E thing, right? In the end, maybe we're living through a period right now where AI has a bad environmental impact, and it's hard to argue against this. But if it allows us to really transform our global processes, and media buying is just one of these processes, then in the long run, we may actually catch back up to having been sustainable from the get-go because we've changed all the inefficiencies that were there before, right?
Yeah, so maybe to conclude by trying to sum that up into a sentence, which is, instead of thinking, how am I going to use AI, we have to work back from the outcome and the effectiveness of what we're trying to drive. And I think we've done that before from a sustainability perspective, because we heard some earlier, we'll hear some more later, in the fact that by looking to see the performance gains or the effectiveness gains, and then working back, you'll get the sustainability benefits and improvements. It's the same for AI?
It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Think about this, and this is an example that was brought up before. Non-viewable impressions are wasted, okay? And this is just like the very beginning of your journey into waste, because sustainability in media is a journey into wasteland, like literally. Like you need to understand what is useful and what is not, right? But viewability is a very simple factor to account for. But then if you are starting to think about everything that does not correspond to optimized user behavior, like sociological values, like people that don't want to be exposed to my brands, and if you start thinking that deep understanding of the human psyche is necessary to actually reduce the waste, right? That you actually want to show an impression to someone who's truly interested in the end. So AI targeting, like advanced, more than intent, like understanding of what people need, then you can tie that back to sustainability, saying, okay, maybe I need to just show my ads to these people because maybe actually the others are having a bad reaction to being shown the creative. And then you tie that back to, you start thinking about what's my acceptance rate, and to understand the human psyche, I'm going to be very frank with you, and you've all tried it with ChatGPT. LLMs are really good. They're really good at understanding how we think.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that, and again, a really good example of how we can like tangibly leverage AI in a way that is impactful versus choosing to slap AI onto something that we're already doing. So hopefully that's given people enough food for thought, and we will be also around for questions in the break. So thank you so much for super interesting discussion.
Thank you. That was cool.